Okay, what can I do for you? Are you a non-Muslim? Do you have questions about
Yeah,
Islam?
to be honest, my friend, he's like super, like huge believer, like he's Muslim, and I have been like talking back and forth about it. I'm not Christian, but I am like I've been basically born Christian, because my father is Christian. So, but then I like kind of left the religion and I went my own way. And recently I like discovered God, and like right now I'm kind of in between the Christianity and the Islam, and I'm still like not kind of like I'm still like kind of confused. I feel like I'm kind of stuck, between that. I like some things about Islam, some things I don't like. Then I still like some things about Christianity. So yeah, my friend told me to join this, that you can actually clear some doubts and some things that I will be probably that I'm stuck in. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay, so I'll give you the choice. What are the things that you don't like about Islam, and what are the things that you like about Christianity? Uh, you can choose which one you want to start with, and you're welcome to go with that.
Sure.
So either you start by telling me what you like about Christianity, or you start by telling me what you don't like about Islam. You can choose.
Yeah, the main concern is actually following the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. That's kind of main concern, because there is the argument that he married like 9-year-old Aisha, or what's her name. There is a bigger context to it. I know it's kind of stupid, but there is bigger context to it. Like at that time, it was like different time and these things. But in my perspective, like if I choose to follow Jesus Christ or Prophet Muhammad, like for me, it's easier to actually follow Jesus Christ, because like in my perspective, or like Christianity perspective, he's considered like sinless. But like the Muhammad, he like married 9-year-old, and also like he was, I think, mentioned like 80 to 100 battles or something like that. So yeah, so
80
in
to
my
100
perspective,
what?
it's like he was like in 80 to 100 battles in his lifetime. So yeah, so like right now, like in my life, I'm like trying to like study as much as possible about like both religions. But like that's like the main
Uh-huh.
concern for me. And like so far, what I
Uh-huh.
have learned, it kind of makes me closer to Jesus than Prophet Muhammad.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Okay,
If you
so
understand.
the common claim of Aisha, which has really nothing to do with the foundation of the religion, like in any way, shape, or form. Let me just make a comment, and then you can tell me what you like about Christianity, because you made a contrast there. You claim that, therefore I like Jesus because he was like peaceful or sinless or whatever. Now, first thing is, you can't prove Jesus was sinless. That's just a claim you're making. Jesus didn't say that about himself. And if you look at his life, for example, where he forbade people from cursing. For example, see, cursing is a sin. He told people not to curse because cursing is a sin. But he cursed his own disciples. He called them stupid and idiots and whatever. He did that even though he told them not to do it. Jesus says to his companions or whatever that he's not going to the Passover. And then he goes to the Passover, which is considered a lie. Jesus, a Canaanite woman, needed to be. I'm talking about the biblical narrative, by the way. That's not a Quranic narrative. We don't have
Mhm.
these information, but that's what the Bible records of Jesus. Jesus, a Canaanite woman, comes to for him so he can heal her in Matthew 15,
Mhm.
and then chapter 15 basically, and then he literally tell her to go, and then calls her a dog, refers to her as a dog. So if you want to talk about sin and sinless and whatever, there's no way, shape or form you can use the Bible to prove that Jesus wasn't sinless. So that's the first. The
Mhm.
second thing I'm going to say to you, in the Christian belief, Jesus is God or part of the Trinity, correct?
I mean, yeah.
Is he, or he isn't? Which one? You gotta pick
Yeah,
and choose, because you didn't seem sure about that.
well, that's
Uh-huh.
the thing. Like I'm not 100% like sure, to be honest, about. Like I
Uh-huh.
like I kind of, the more I read the Bible, the more I believe like he's son of God. But to claim that he
Okay.
is a God, I'm not standing behind his claim.
Oh, okay. So regardless then of what position you take on Jesus, well, I'm gonna use the Bible. Can you show me, where does the Bible tell you what is the correct age of marriage?
I don't think there is anything like that. I don't know like the Bible with 100% certainty, but I don't think there is like any age of.
Okay, there isn't. So if God didn't tell you which age it is, then where do you get that moral teaching? Of course, there are Christians who would refer to verses in Ezekiel, for example, Ezekiel, the book of Ezekiel, which talks about puberty. So it talks about the
Mhm.
women development of puberty, and they will reference that this is the thing that we can use to give us an indication that a woman is ready. Now, but there is nothing in the Bible, the whole Bible, from beginning to end, whether it is Old or New Testament, that talks about the age of marriage. So now, can you tell me, morality comes from God? Morality comes from the Creator only. Human beings cannot make moral judgments. It would be subjective, and therefore it's not binding. So if morality comes from God and God doesn't tell you what the age is, then under what basis are you criticizing Prophet Muhammad for marrying any age? What is the moral criteria that you're using to say that this was something that is not great, whatever term you want to use? And you know what? Here is why morally God doesn't agree with this, or this is wrong, or whatever term you want to use. What is the standard that you're using for that?
I mean, I'm using like just like, I mean, if like in my perspective, 9-year-old is a child, and Muhammad at the time he was around 40, and there's like grown man.
Okay. First. Look. I'm not asking. I'm going to respond to what you just said, which is factually incorrect. But before I respond to what you just said, which is factually incorrect, I asked you the question not about your own. You went on to give me your subjective opinion, which is not a criteria for morality. So can you tell me, where do you bring that it is morally wrong? Not societal opinions, not emotional views, not I think this, but it looks like that, but it feels like this. That's irrelevant. That's not where we get right or wrong from. It's not feelings. Your feelings are not the arbiter for us. And we are not going to be judged by the opinion of you, like I just met you today. We're not going to take you as the moral standard of a whole, 2 billion people who are Muslims, for example. Now, you agreed with me that morality comes from God. So now, can you tell me, what did you use to come to that conclusion and make that claim that this is morally incorrect? What are you using for that?
I mean, to be honest, basically, from what I have learned in this society.
Okay, so you're using a subjective view of a person who's born in somewhere in Europe in the 21st century. What they taught you today is what you're using as a criteria to determine that this is correct or incorrect. And that's subjective and is essentially social. You are a product of your own society, and your society is not like every other society. And it is not a criteria, due to the fact it's being subjective, to make moral judgments over other societies.
Kind of confusing, but yeah. Yeah, that's right. We are. I mean, yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, but
okay. So moving on now. Moving on. So if you don't have a moral command, we look at the Bible. Like I said, for example, if you're now comparing Christianity and Islam, so we look at the Bible. If you look at the Bible, we see the book of Ezekiel. Like I told you, that we have these verses that talks about puberty, and we have people using it. Even that doesn't talk about the right age of marriage or whatever, but it talks about women being ready, and then it refers to puberty, like for example, development of certain body parts. I'm not gonna, because it's detailed and it's not really appropriate for for all ages. I'm not gonna say what the verses are saying, but you get what the point I'm making. Talks about certain body parts. Talks about, let's just say, the puberty, the development that it's related to puberty. Now, puberty can range all the way from 8 years old to 13 years old. We're talking today. What is the source for that? For example, the NHS, the National Health Service in the UK, will tell you that puberty can range from 8 years old. You can ask, obviously, anyways, that's a very common thing. If you have sisters or whatever, they can tell you. It can range all the way from 8 years old all the way to 13 years old. So under the biblical narrative, this range from 8 to 13 is completely valid. Why is it completely valid? Because it is the puberty. And puberty, if we're basing it on Ezekiel, then that would be the case. If we look at the Bible, it talks about, for example, the Bible, chapter 31 in Numbers, the book of Numbers, chapter 31, verse 17 and 18. Do you know what is there? There's a command there where Moses commands his army. Moses, the prophet of God, commands his army.
Yeah.
Sorry? Yeah, he commands his army in war, that they capture the little girls that have not yet known a man for themselves. And the word there in Hebrew, it's about children. So little girls, children, child girls, to take them for themselves, that have not yet known a man, have not had intercourse with a man, didn't do anything with a man. And the Bible has an explicit command to go and take these girls for themselves. Now we get Christians that are saying, oh, of course, they're going to do this to them. They're going to do, what are you going to do? They're going to take the little girls do what with them exactly anymore, yeah? What are they going to do with them? They're going to take them to the kindergarten, which doesn't exist that time. Of course not. They take them for there's only one purpose where you take women for. And the emphasis on the idea of not knowing a man is there's only one reason why you would take them. And you can read the biblical commentaries on these passages that will clearly talk about that. You can look at, for example, the marriage of Rebecca and Isaac in the Old Testament, which if you make a calculation of when Sarah, how old was Sarah and how old was Abraham when he was born, and all of these calculations will come to the conclusion that she was between 3 and 10 years old, between 3 and 10. You cannot go more than 10, but between 3 and 10 when she married Isaac. And we have rabbis, right, in the Hebrew tradition, which explicitly would tell you that it is okay to get married at the age of 3 is the limit, basically, for them. They base it on this incident of Isaac and Rebecca. So now, if you want to use the Bible, now you're surprised, but like that's the objective fact. This is the biblical narrative now, okay? So if now we're talking about the biblical narratives, you look at even the saints of Christianity. You look at these saints of Athanasius and all of these saints. You'll see many of them have, for example, had brides at the age of 12, for example. The age of marriage in their time in the Roman Empire was 12 years old. And that's why the Catholic Encyclopedia would record that Mary was 12 years old when she married Joseph. And then, based on that also, you had the Roman Empire having the age of marriage as 12 years old. So this is Christianity. Nobody can come from a Christian or Jewish worldview and tell us a certain age is right and a certain age is wrong, because they don't have a sanction from God, a moral sanction, objective moral sanction, or something determined using God's command that will tell us this age is right and this age is wrong. Okay? Now, not using the Bible now and using your society and what you're trying to say, like using society as an example. If we use society as an example, do you know the age of marriage, for example, in the UK and in the US 200 years ago? Now, ignore the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, 1,400 years ago. I'm asking you 200 years ago. What was the age of marriage in the UK and the US? Do you know?
I'm not certain with that, but I heard it was like pretty low, around like now, I don't know, like 10, 11.
Like what? What's pretty low? Okay, so if you know that, if you know that it was around that age, then under what kind of rational idea are you trying to criticize it? Societies were very different. Now, the age of marriage in the UK was 7 years old. In the 1700s and in 1800s. You can say that, but the fact is that was the case throughout human history until only recently, let's say the end of 1900s, the middle 1900s, where you had the Second World War, where they introduced women into the workforce, the liberal Enlightenment movement, feminism, all of these things. Until all of that, the age was this low in the whole world. Even today, because you probably think about a number 18, that's the only number you probably think about in your mind right now, for it being okay and not being okay. But that's because your society convinced. But the age of consent today in almost around the majority of the world is 15, 16. In the US today, it depends on the state. There are states that have as low as 15, some 16. So it's even today in America and in the West and in the entire world, like the Philippines and Japan or whatever, they had it like 12 and 13, only like 10 years ago or something like that. They recently changed it. The people in the West are living in a bubble, and they think the whole world is operating under their bubble. Many of them are living in a bubble, and they're completely not in a view of human history. How humans lived history, not only how they lived history, but even today, how they're still living history. They are completely unaware of that. And they would come and talk about the Prophet Muhammad and the age this, age that. You got to wake up. Like, the world does not operate under what you've been taught in school or in your societal narrative. Just because someone convinced you something is a no-no, it doesn't mean that the rest of the world operates under that same idea, or that the whole human history operates under that idea. So when it comes to the UK, William Blackstone, which was a jurist, you know what a jurist is, like a judge, a jurist, in the UK at that time, he wrote a book. It's called Commentaries on the Law of England. And he was a jurist in that time, living that time. And he's the one who records that a woman can be given in marriage at the age of 7. And obviously, even in the US, like I said, it was 10 years old, and some states like Delaware had it at 7 as well. We're talking in the 1800s, 200 years ago. We're not talking about 1,400 years. That's why throughout human history, until 100 years ago, you're not going to find a single person that criticized the Prophet Muhammad for that. You're going to see the people criticizing Prophet Muhammad for everything, for wars, for whatever you mentioned, which we're going to come to, which is the wars and battles and all of this stuff. But you're not going to find a single person, non-Muslim, who criticized the Prophet Muhammad for this action. Now, first and foremost, you're not going to find anyone in his society criticizing him for that, because Aisha, his wife, she was betrothed already before him. Before the Prophet was introduced, or even in the picture, she was already betrothed to someone else. You know what betrothal is? Like engagement, like basically. She was already betrothed to someone else before him for marriage. This is how the society was. Nobody criticized the Prophet Muhammad for that at that time, and nobody did until I told you recently, the last 100 years or whatever, when things gradually changed. Yes, what do you want to say?
Yes, so sorry for interrupting. I have a follow-up question, another one. I don't have much time, so if you can move to another question.
Yeah, no. Look, you open this can of forums, you know. So because this can of forums is not a small thing. A lot of people. I'll tell you why people use this marriage to Aisha thing. I'll tell you why people use it. People use it because of the shock factor. That's it. People today have been brainwashed to believe the shock factor. The shock factor. Oh. The shock factor. So because people today have been programmed to believe a certain thing when it comes to the age. This number 18 is the only number they see day and night. They sleep 18. They wake up 18. It's like, look, if you're 17. You're 17, 360 days, or 64 days or whatever, and 23 hours and 59 minutes, and it's a crime if anything happens. But 1 minute later, it's okay. What kind of logic is that? That is the Western logic of today. So the reality is, women are different, and their maturity levels are different, and it ranges from one person to another. Now, you use the term child. So now let me correct you on what I said. What you said is wrong. So let me correct you on what I said you said was wrong. Can you define to me what a child is? You know, words and language have definitions. So not your definition, but the linguistic definition of the word child. What is a child?
I consider a child, a human being that hasn't hit the puberty yet, and that has like a mind of child, hasn't hit the puberty, we can say simply.
Sure. So puberty is the defining factor. By the way, in all dictionaries, until some dictionaries only recently changed a little bit here and there, open any dictionary in human history, child was someone who was under the age of puberty. Now, did Aisha hit the age of puberty, or she did not hit the age of puberty before consummation in the marriage of Prophet Muhammad?
Apparently she did.
She did. So why did you use the term child? Why are you using a dishonest term, which you yourself has just defined, to be incorrect under objective factor reality, that she wasn't a child with the definition of a child? Do you know Prophet Muhammad, he made a contract with her 3 years before consummation.
Yeah,
and then she wasn't with the Prophet. Yeah, and she wasn't with the Prophet in the house. So a marriage contract does not mean intercourse. It does not mean physical engagement with the person in Islam. You can have a marriage contract as a surety that you are with this person, okay? But it does not necessitate any physical contact. So Aisha was still with her family after that marriage contract was done until she reached puberty, and then the consummation took place. So why would the Prophet wait if it was about young girls and all of this nonsense that people say? Why would he possibly wait until she hits the age of puberty? Because by definition, the people who do these things, when you use the term children, once you hit puberty, you're expired for these people. It makes no sense. Why would you wait until that happens? That is the exact opposite of what you would want if you were that type of person.
All right. Thank you for explanation. Can you give me more explanation when it comes to those battles? Because my friend.
Okay, sure.
Muslim.
Okay, I'm gonna say the last thing. Okay, I'm gonna say the last thing, and then I'm gonna answer quickly this battle thing. Okay, when it comes to the Prophet ﷺ's marriage, last thing I'm gonna briefly, quickly mention, because there's so many things that I can mention on this as responses. But I'm gonna just briefly say something. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ married multiple wives during his life, multiple wives, 12, 13 wives, you can say, throughout his life. All of these women, all of them were divorcees and widows. Either divorcees or
What?
widows, except Aisha. Widows,
Oh,
or divorcees, meaning they got divorced or their husband died. So
yeah.
the Prophet ﷺ, his first wife, Khadija, she was 15 years older than him. Older. So now we talk about age and older and younger. She was 15 years older than him. He wasn't with someone else until she died. After she died, he married Sauda, which was also an older woman, and she was a widow. Then he married all the rest of his wives, which were all divorcees and widows. A man who is
Mhm.
looking for women, young, and all of these things, that is the last thing he would do. He would marry old virgins, young in age, and all of that. This image that people are trying to paint, it's nonsensical. Now, the last very important comment I need to make. But like I told you in the beginning, this is not a foundational issue. If someone says, I don't believe the Prophet Muhammad married Aisha in this age, we as Muslims are not going to say this person is a disbeliever. That doesn't take you out of the fold of Islam, because it's not one of the 6 articles of faith. It's not one of the 5
Oh, it's
pillars of the religion. It's not a
because I have
foundational issue. It's information about the age of a wife the Prophet married. Yes.
because I
So do
have
you
like my
understand this
colleague is
point? So I'm trying to say that this is not a criticism towards the religion of Islam itself. This is just a side point at best. Because if someone says I don't believe it, it doesn't disqualify them from being a Muslim. But like I said, only people use it because of the shock factor. Now, to talk about the battles, you said 800. Either I said how
no,
many battles
sorry,
you said?
8200.
8,200 or whatever? Huh?
Yeah,
Yeah,
82.
8,200 battles. Now, can you tell me what is the source for this funny story about 8,200 battles? Where's the source? Because that is
Uh,
obviously a joke that never happened. But
yeah,
where
my
did you
friend
get this number from?
Summer Gardner, who is watching this live stream, he told
Uh
me
huh.
8200.
Well, of course, that's
He's
nonsense, and there's no source for this. Uh huh.
oh, I see. Well, then
Of
in this
course.
case,
They were not 8,200 battles. The overwhelming majority, also to keep in mind, with the
mhm,
exception of very few battles, you can say 2 or 3 or whatever, or even less. The overwhelming majority of the other battles, which were in the, you can say from 10 to 20 battles, if you even want to go to an extreme, if you want to consider certain things battles and certain things are not, but they're definitely not 8,200. Now, these battles, the Prophet ﷺ had, the overwhelming majority of them were defensive battles. So the first battle, for example, the Battle of Badr, was a defensive battle. The Prophet, he left Mecca because they were trying to kill him and his companions, and he had to go to Medina. They followed him and they fought him. And they fought him there to try to kill him. The Battle of Khandaq or Al-Ahzab, it was also a defensive battle. I can go on and on and on, give you the number of defensive battles the Prophet ﷺ, or the Battle of Uhud was a defensive battle. There were so many defensive battles. Even certain battles which you can say are not
yeah,
necessarily defensive, they were done with justified reasons. Like, for example, there was a caravan going with the people of Mecca. They were going with a caravan, and the Prophet said that this caravan should be raided. This caravan is carrying goods. The Muslims who went to Medina left all their goods there. So they have a right to reclaim the things that they left, because they left because they were leaving for their lives. They had no choice because they were going to kill them. So now there's a caravan with goods. So they're trying to get back what belongs to them. So that is a justified reason. Similarly, with the conquest of Mecca, coming back to Mecca, their homeland and their families and their homeland and city. And when the Prophet ﷺ came, by the way, in the conquest of Mecca, the Prophet ﷺ, when he came with a huge, massive army, and the people in Mecca, which were fighting all of these battles, trying to kill the Prophet one time after the other, do you know what the Prophet did when he came and they surrendered? Do you know
no.
what he did to them? They were persecuting him for 13 years. They killed some of his companions. I told you, he had to leave because they were going to kill him. They sent a bounty hunter after him when he left. Now, do you know what the Prophet did? He killed them all. No, of course he didn't kill them all. But that's the logical explanation. And even if he did that, nobody would blame him. But do you know what he did? He let them go free. He let the people who persecuted him, killed some of his companions, plotted to kill him, sent a bounty hunter after him when he left. He let them go free. Now, you cannot do this. I cannot do this. We wouldn't do that. If someone was persecuting me for 13 years, killed my family members, like, I had to leave because they were plotting to kill me. They fought battles and battle after me, trying to kill me. They didn't even stop when I left. But when I came back, when I was in a position of power, I showed mercy. Now, that is the Prophet Muhammad that some people are trying to paint him as battles and not battles and all of this stuff, right?
So the other thing
So,
I have
okay.
also
Yes.
because yeah, there is a thing that between Christians and Muslim people, that Muslim people, they don't believe like that Jesus Christ was crucified, and Christians, they believe that Jesus was crucified. Apparently,
Okay.
there is arguments for that, that Muhammad has been told by an angel or something like that. So if you can please, like, just somehow, like, from your perspective, like, clarify me, like, why do Christians believe that and Muslims do not believe that
Why
Jesus
do
Christ was
Muslims?
crucified?
Okay. Look, it's not an argument that has been taught by an angel or whatever. The argument is Prophet Muhammad is a prophet of God, and if you are a prophet of God, then you receive revelation from God. Then, if God says that someone was not killed, then this is a historical reality that someone was not killed. Now, when it comes to Christians have zero eyewitness account of the crucifixion. Not a single eyewitness account recorded at the time of the crucifixion of Jesus. It doesn't exist.
Mhm.
The Bible, the earliest manuscript you have of it, do you know how many years? I know you're researching something. I don't know if you're listening to me or not.
Yeah, you know what? I'm so sorry, but I need to go. I just have a meeting. I'm so sorry, but thank you so much for your explanation. Thank you so much for being here, but I really have to go right now. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. But to give you one statement to just answer your question very briefly and simply, there is no eyewitness accounts of the crucifixion. The accounts of the Bible are 400 years later, separate from Jesus. The Bible itself refutes the idea of the crucifixion. In the Psalms, there's a whole chapter which talks about the protection of Jesus that God promises. And the narrative of the crucifixion itself is false. The 3 days and 3 nights that Jesus is supposed to remain in the grave, he doesn't remain in the grave 3 days and 3 nights. So the narrative itself is contradictory within the Bible itself. We reject it because we know God knows history more than anyone else, and there is no proof that any Christian can present that this is a historical reality. But for now, you can go and have your meeting. I was going to talk to you about Christianity, obviously, and start telling you the whole huge issues and problems. But I started by responding to the claims that you have, because we don't have an issue responding to questions. But when we start talking about Christianity, then people disappear. But I'll let you have your meeting and enjoy your meeting. All right, my friend? It was a pleasure
Thank you so
talking to
much,
you.
bro. Nice to meet you.
Bye-bye. No worries. Bye-bye.